Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us. My name is Giovanna, and I lead product marketing at Interac. I would like to personally welcome you to our Interac Innovation Series webinar for micro and small businesses, and our focus today is on payments. The Interac Innovation Series are both live and webinar formats intended to help businesses specifically with topics in the payment space. As we know, the payment space is evolving at a rapid pace, and new solutions like technologies are being offered almost every day. So throughout the series, we hope to provide some key insights, as well as key takeaways to help you, your business, and ultimately your bottom line. A few housekeeping items. If you have any questions, please send them to us throughout the webinar. We will try to answer as many as possible at the end. We have also left about 10 to 15 minutes for questions if you wish to wait till the end to ask them. Any references to stats mentioned in the webinar will be shared on our Interac Developer Center, and that URL is developer.interac.ca. And lastly, we'll be sending a survey after the webinar. If you can kindly provide your feedback, we would love to hear what you think, as well as let us know any other topics you'd like us to dive into. I would like to introduce you now to Charlie Traynor, who is the Director of Products and Platforms at Interac. He is responsible for enabling Canadians to move money using Interac e-transfer.
Thanks, Giovanna. I'm here today to speak with you about digital payments and the potential impact to your business. This webinar is broken down into 3 parts. The first section will focus on the latest payment behavior trends for micro and small businesses, specifically in Canada, with new data from a research firm we work with. The second section will talk about some key strategies, particularly when it comes to payments, to help you with your business. And in the last section, we'll discuss a few different use cases so you can see how some organizations are benefiting from digital payments. So let's dive right into the first section. The Canadian economy is fueled by small businesses, with Canadian small businesses contributing an average of 30% of their province's GDP. According to Stats Canada's Business Register Innovation, Science and Economic Development Canada report, there are 1.17 million employer businesses, almost 98% of which were small businesses, defined as businesses with 1 to 99 employees. And of those active Canadian employer businesses, micro businesses are the largest SMEs, the small, medium, and enterprise group, with just under 55% representation. Micro businesses we define as small businesses with 1 to 4 employees. Now, starting and running a successful and profitable small business is challenging. Business Development Canada, who works with many Canadian startups and small businesses, has identified a list of 7 ways to make businesses more successful. On top of that list is tracking and managing cash flow. And that's because one of the main causes of business failure is poor cash flow management. Small businesses rely on the sources of revenue to manage their incoming and outgoing cash and to budget accordingly. They must ensure that funds are available for staff payroll, vendor and supplier invoices, paying rent, reinvestment back into the business. But receiving payment continues to be a challenge. When it comes to options, SMEs have indicated the following payment priorities. 14% want faster payment processing, receiving payments in real time and improving cash flow. 34% want low-cost transaction fees, a reduction in the cost per transaction applied to the acceptance and or processing of payment options outside cash and checks. And 49% cited safety and security, ensuring all payments are completed within a private and secure environment. Let's go deeper into the need to get paid faster. Clearly, the faster you get paid, the easier it is to manage cash flow. A recent joint study that Interac conducted with RFI reported that over 75% of SMEs consider being able to receive early payments from customers important. We also found that it takes an average of 2.6 weeks to receive payments from customers, with much longer timeframes reported by businesses with revenue of over $100 million. 16% of businesses feel forced to offer discounts for early payments, and that cuts into the business's revenue and profit. So how do small and medium enterprise businesses get paid and pay? While we often hear that cash and checks are dead, that's definitely not the case in the SME environment. In 2017, both large corporations and SMEs reported checks as the most common method of payment. They're using checks to make payments to government agencies, including for tax purposes, rent payments, payments to other businesses for goods and services, and even payroll. 60% of SMEs are using checks to pay for most business expenses, more than any other payment method. Smaller businesses, especially, tend to use cash and checks more than larger SMEs. SMEs manage their business receivables in the same way they do their payables. Checks and cash, again, are the most common payment methods accepted by a wide margin, especially among micro businesses. 70% of SMEs, of small and medium businesses, accept cash payments, 56% accept check payments, and 45% even prefer cash and check payments. The majority of those have chosen not to accept card payments, saying they're generally satisfied with the existing payment methods. And furthermore, 73% of businesses who operate retail businesses have indicated they accept cash payments from their customers. Over 30% of them even preferring cash payments for offline sales. These merchants prefer cash because they believe it's cheaper to accept, quicker to process, more secure and convenient, and there's no wait time for transaction processing. All of this is to say that a large number of SMEs, and especially micro businesses, tend to use and prefer to use cash and checks because they believe they are cheaper, easier, more convenient, and quicker to process than other payment methods. Businesses often believe that cash and checks are more secure than alternate methods of payment. 40% of SMEs prefer cash to cards because they feel cash is more secure, and 14% have indicated that security concerns are preventing them from moving away from checks. Research would challenge some of these beliefs. So let's look at checks in more detail. Payments Canada estimates that the average cost of a check issued in Canada is $15. So that's a very high number. So what goes into this calculation? It includes the costs of processing the check, includes labor costs, postage, production and distribution fees, and the fees charged by financial institutions for processing, clearing, and settling the payment. Consider the value of resources who are managing check-related costs, like background checks, reconciliation, or tracking of payments. There's hours that employees could be spending on other tasks that move the business forward. With smaller micro businesses where there are few employees wearing many hats, this time is especially valuable. And what about the speed of transaction processing for checks? Once someone decides to send you a check, they need to fill it in or print it, get it signed, put it in the mail. And until you receive it, you don't even know if they've sent it. Once receiving it, you need to deposit it, possibly involving a visit to the bank or an ATM. And then you have to wait to see if it comes back NSF. Based on some typical payment terms, it can take up to 60 days to process traditional check payments. That means it could take up to 60 days for businesses to access liquid funds so they can use those to manage day-to-day operations. And it's important to highlight the time and uncertainty of checks. The effort it takes to chase customers or suppliers whose checks are lost in the mail or there's insufficient funds. Payments may never come through. Let's turn our focus to cash. In many cases, cash is convenient, and obviously most retail businesses with a physical presence will accept cash. However, there are many risks associated with cash payments. Consider the time and resources required to manually process cash payments, time waiting in line at banks to make deposits, risks associated holding and carrying large amounts of cash, and the problems if cash is lost or misplaced. All these cash payments need to be tracked against purchases and invoices manually. There are costs associated with human error, properly identifying and tracing these errors, making adjustments, and potentially writing off the inaccurate payments. The safety concerns with cash payments include the fact that cash can get lost, and if it's lost, there's no traceability, no way to get that money back. For any micro or small business, any loss of funds can have a huge impact. And the safe storage of cash is important. When holding any amount of cash, the business will want to ensure that it's safely stored so it's not lost or stolen. This doesn't just mean holding it in a safe at the end of the day. Some SME businesses are on the go. That means they're carrying cash in purses, wallets, or in car glove boxes, traveling from location to location. It's very risky, and that cash can get stolen. So with the majority of SMEs using cash and checks to make and receive business payments and product purchases, it's no wonder that half of SMEs believe their business spends too much time on payment processing activities. The wires and EFTs are alternate payment methods that some businesses are moving towards. And by EFT, sometimes known as AFTs or ACHs. We're talking about direct debits and direct credits. Payments Canada estimates that EFTs account for over 40% of the total value of business expenditures. That's the number that's gone up over the last few years. There are cost and resource impacts to these payment methods, of course. Wires carry very high transactional costs, and both wires and EFTs require specific financial information like bank accounts and transit numbers. A business also needs to ensure they have the processes in place to securely capture, store, and handle this sensitive information. And there are always customers who may not be willing to share the information required. And there is also development and configuration costs for EFT file setup, which often depend on the specific financial institution. Two of the top barriers to adopting new payment methods are the cost per transaction, cited by 47% of SMEs, and the cost of implementation, cited by 35%. Micro businesses have identified pricing as a key consideration for accepting alternate payment methods for customer payment for their products and services. 34% have said transaction costs would need to be cheaper, 15% said infrastructure costs would need to be cheaper. Let's talk about card payments. Accepting card payments can be one way to make payments convenient for your customers, for sure. However, there are several downsides. Getting set up to accept card payments can be an onerous process, one that micro businesses often don't want to have to take on. The cost is also a big issue, particularly for low margin businesses. For SME merchants, the fees, especially those associated with premium credit cards, have long been a challenge for small businesses in Canada. Historically, credit card payments have had merchant fees as high as 3 to 4% of the transaction value. Those transaction fees and interchange fees hurt a small business's bottom line, and for smaller businesses, the amount of overall revenue they generate may not warrant the fees associated. Half of micro businesses felt their business is too small to accept card payments, and 38% of businesses have said accepting cards is too expensive. And while the vast majority of card payments are good, the occasional chargeback can be a real problem for a small business. So in short, many SMEs and especially micro businesses tend to use and prefer to use cash and checks. They do so because they believe cash and checks are cheaper, easier, more convenient, and quicker to process than alternate payment methods. The data and research, however, show that that's not the case. In the second section, we'll talk about some of the payment strategies that can be used for a small business. Here are 5 of the key strategies that we recommend for a business. First of all, to analyze profitability. So obviously, a business is successful if it's taking in more money than it's spending. And over the long term, that profitability is a fundamental, critical thing for a business. But secondly, tracking and forecasting cash flow is sometimes a little less obvious. But that is something, as I mentioned before, that is critical for keeping a business going. We recommend looking at financing or leasing for the big outlays. That keeps the cash flow healthy. Focus on receivables. This is very important for businesses to keep the money coming in a timely manner. So ask for a percentage up front if possible, rather than waiting till afterwards to invoice, or invoice immediately once work is done. Make sure you don't let time pass before sending out those invoices. And if it makes sense, incent people to make timely payments against those invoices. And lastly, ensure you accept electronic payments. We recommend auditing your payment processes. You should look at understanding when payments are being made and received. What are the types of payments? What's the effort required to deal with those different types of payments from an end-to-end perspective? What are the risks associated with those types of payments? For example, data privacy. And what uncertainties are those payment types adding to your cash flow? Having looked at that, investigate alternative methods of making and receiving payments. There are many methods of making and receiving payments. Each one has its place. Each one has its pros and cons. I want to talk to you a bit more about Interac e-transfer in particular. In 2018, we estimate that 15% of the value of current Interac e-transfer service is for business customers. Businesses who have used the service generally find that e-transfer is very useful in terms of making and accepting payments. So why are e-transfers so popular? Quite a few reasons. Firstly, there are good funds. Once a transfer has been deposited into the recipient's account, it's available for use. There's no hold, no uncertainty, and no chargebacks. Interac e-transfers are fast. In many cases, the transfers are instant in about 72% of all cases, and the rest are completed within a half an hour or so. Interac e-transfer is safe. Accounts are covered by zero liability policies, and the transfers themselves are highly secure. They're convenient. You can send and receive transfers at home, at the office, even while traveling or at a customer's location via mobile banking. E-transfers are transparent. You always know where the money is, and you have an electronic record of all the transfers. They're inexpensive. Interac e-transfer is included for free in some banking packages and for low cost in others. And importantly, they're ubiquitous. Interac e-transfer is available to almost all individuals and small businesses in Canada. To a business owner, the ability to immediately request, send, and receive money from anyone in Canada and to easily send and settle invoices simplifies accounting processes. It's easy to use, and it helps eliminate the reliance on checks. It allows for invoices to be settled in real time. It offers easily trackable data, ultimately reducing costs. We added 2 features to the service at the end of 2017, enabling even faster and easier ways to conduct business payments using e-transfer. I'll talk to you about those now. The first one is our request money feature. This allows a business to send their customer a request for money that they're owed. The feature includes the option of adding an invoice number and a due date. Let me walk through how this might work. Let's say a freelance graphic designer has created a website for their client. Now that the project is complete and all the files have been delivered, they're super excited to get paid. So our graphic designer logs into their bank's online or mobile banking site, navigates to the Interac e-transfer request money feature. They type in the amount that the client owes, and they select which account they would like the funds to be deposited to. They include a personal message with the request thanking the client for their business, and they can add an invoice number and a due date to help track the invoice and the payments. Once that request is sent by email or by SMS, the client is notified instantly to pay. It's very simple for the client, who can fulfill the request with a couple of clicks from online banking. When the client accepts and fulfills that request for money, the graphic designer receives a notification letting them know that the payment has been deposited into their account and the funds are now available. To highlight the benefits of this request money feature, to emphasize that the funds are immediate. They're available almost as soon as the recipient accepts the request. Time spent waiting for an invoice to be mailed and a check to be mailed back vanishes. They're convenient. Request money is accessed through your bank's online or mobile banking. And they're cost effective. As a requester, you only pay a small fee if your request is accepted. The person fulfilling the request does not pay. The second feature is auto deposit. This ensures that money sent to you using Interac e-Transfer is automatically deposited into your bank account. It eliminates the need for security question and answer, and there's no need to log into online banking for each transfer to deposit it. This feature is great for micro and small businesses who want to collect money electronically from several clients. Let me walk through how auto deposit works. Let's say an insurance broker receives policy payments from clients. Auto deposit allows that broker to register the broker's email address to an account. When clients send any e-transfer to that email address, the money is automatically deposited into the broker's specified bank account without requiring any action from the broker. The broker still receives notifications by email or SMS for information and tracking purposes. Not only does this save time for the broker, but clients no longer have to specify the security question and answer for such transfers. This auto deposit feature is safe and secure. As with any Interac e-transfer, no private financial information is shared. Senders and recipients don't have to trade security question and answers, eliminating security risk to the extent that such combinations may be reused for other transactions. It's easy to use. Because transfers are automatically deposited, no action is required from the recipient, and senders don't need to specify security question and answers, making the process easier for everyone. And they're fast. Transfers to the registered email address will be automatically deposited into the account right away. A note about fees. While many financial institutions now offer free Interac e-transfers as part of their banking packages, some may charge a fee, and it's at their discretion. These fees do vary by individual financial institution. Interac Corp is committed to being a low-cost, economical payments provider, and businesses will find that Interac payment options usually offer lower fees than competitors. As for security, we know that businesses want to ensure their payments are managed in a safe and secure way. How safe is Interac e-Transfer? Well, first, we should remember that money is not being sent by email or text message. Only the notification travels over the internet to advise the recipient that the transfer has been sent and to provide instructions to deposit or notification that it has been deposited in the case of auto deposit. The money always resides at the financial institutions and it's transferred securely through existing payment networks. Security is foundational to everything we do at Interac. We have a global leading track record at payment fraud mitigation with some of the lowest fraud rates around the world. Security is inherently tied to trust. We believe that everything starts with trust. Thousands of Canadian businesses and millions of Canadian consumers have been trusting Interac with their payments for over 3 decades. Interac is the most trusted financial services brand in Canada and the 12th most trusted brand overall in Canada. In this third section, I'll just briefly cover a few use cases that these new features allow businesses to use. First of all, rent. Many landlords now collect rent using Interac e-Transfer. With auto deposit, the landlord can register their email address to streamline the process. Compared to writing checks, it's much more convenient, and e-transfers don't bounce. Invoicing for on-site work is another major use case. Consider service contractors like plumbers, HVAC technicians, house cleaners, etc. Once the service has been done, the technician can quickly log into mobile banking and send an Interac request for money on the spot. The customer can easily fulfill the request, in which case the technician's business gets paid immediately. And invoicing for supplies. Once goods are delivered, or even before if payment is required up front, the supplier can send a request for money to the customer. Each request has a due date and an invoice number that the customer will see. And if the customer ignores the request the first time, Interac automatically sends regular reminders so the supplier doesn't have to. So in Canada today, we have a strong and flourishing small business community that's integral to the growth of our economy. But micro and small businesses face many challenges, and annually thousands of businesses don't survive. One of the main causes businesses fail is because they are unable to successfully manage their cash flow. In order for businesses to have positive cash flow, they need to ensure faster availability of funds, certainty of payments without their funds being held. They need to get paid and make their payments in real time with good funds. They need to keep transaction fees low, so not to take away from their revenue and profit margins. And their payments need to be made safely and securely. We've seen that small businesses historically rely on cash and checks. And even though there's lots of transformation in the payment space, many businesses still prefer to use cash and checks. They perceive these methods to be more convenient, cheaper, and safe. Using cash and checks, though, is fraught with challenges, making them less convenient, costlier, and unsafe than might be thought. A small business has many tools they can leverage from their payments toolbox, and that toolbox is growing quickly. Interac e-Transfer and its enhanced features offers micro and small businesses a truly convenient, cost-effective, and secure method of sending, requesting, and receiving money, ensuring they get paid quickly and have visibility into the payments they are making.
Thank you so much, Charlie. Really appreciate that. As a reminder, sources and a summary of today's webinar will be on our Developer Center site. And for more information about Interac e-Transfer, please do connect with your financial institution. We will also include a list of those participating FIs who offer the request money and auto deposit features in that summary. I want to thank you all very much for your time today. We will now open up for Q&A. So if you haven't already sent those, please do go ahead and enter them now. As a reminder, please do access the handout that we have available in the handout tab on your screen. So as we're just looking at the questions, we will give everyone a second. So we do have the one question that I'll start off with. And the question here is, does Interac e-Transfer have pre-authorized debit payment feature?
And the answer is today no, there is no pre-authorized debit capability. What we are doing is creating these features like requests for money that make it easier to get paid even without a pre-authorized debit in place.
Great, thank you, Charlie. We do have a few more, so we'll just kind of go through these. Question is e-Transfer feature available for payments emerging from the US? So question about Canadian dollars versus US dollars and that kind of transaction.
So Interac e-Transfer only deals with Canadian dollars at the moment. It's for transferring money between Canadian bank accounts. And obviously we would love to expand into other currencies and across the border, and we're definitely working on some things, so stay tuned.
A similar question around global payments, so the same answer would apply as it relates to international transactions.
That's right.
Okay, great. So question that we sometimes get, which is a great question, is the dollar value limit on e-transfers. How does that work? Who decides? All that good stuff.
Right. So basically, the financial institutions will set their own limits. So different financial institutions will allow you to send more or less money, and also they will have a limit on how much money you can request. It is particularly important to note, if you are requesting money, that the person you're sending it to could run up against their limit at their financial institution and would be able to fulfill that request. So we advise people to make sure that requests are for reasonable dollar amounts. There may be cases where you want to send multiple requests rather than one big request. But if you need to know what your limits are, you do need to contact your financial institution.
Great, thank you, Charlie. Another question here around email addresses. So the question is, can more than one email address be linked to a bank account for an e-transfer?
Yes, and I'll try to explain this clearly because it does sometimes confuse people. You can register multiple email addresses through auto deposit into one bank account. That's perfectly acceptable. For example, if you're a business that that's operating under say 3 different trade names or 3 lines of business, but you only have 1 bank account, you can set up 3 email addresses that are appropriate for those different lines of business and associate them with 1 bank account. Now, on the flip side, you can only register an email address once across the system. So if you register your email address, we have to know which financial institution and which bank account it's registered with, because when somebody sends money to that email address, we have to know which bank to send it to, and the bank has to know which account to put it into.
Great, thanks, Charlie. A few more questions here. There was a question as well around a list of participating financial institutions for bank accounts and where one can find those. So I can speak to that one. We will have on our website, if you do visit interac.ca, as well as on the summary that we're going to provide on Developer Center, a list of participating FIs. But again, definitely connect with your financial institution. If you do have questions around business accounts specifically, they can definitely speak to those details. Yeah,
and I'll just add a comment here that different financial institutions treat different sizes of business differently. So at some financial institutions, depending on your financial institution, if you're a small business, you probably have access to e-transfer, but if you're a larger business, you may or may not have access to it. So again, that varies between financial institutions.
And similarly, a question I think I can answer here, Charlie, around how do we get more information? I assume that's more information about e-transfer itself as a service. So definitely, again, information on our website, whether you go onto Developer Center or on interac.ca. But do connect with your financial institutions. They're a great resource, and they can speak to your business accounts and how those are set up, and any other questions around fees and details around limits, those kinds of things. Your financial institution is a great resource for you to leverage. An additional question here, it's an excellent question. Is there a way to set up auto requests for money? And the example provided is, it sounds like it's a frequency in terms of around scheduling. So if, for example, a monthly request on the same date. So things like, I guess, potentially rent or ongoing recurring bills, things of that nature.
Right, and especially if you think about rent, it's kind of an obvious thing, which is why we have created that feature. Unfortunately, it's not available at any of the financial institutions yet, but keep tuned.
Great. So another question here. Let's say auto deposit. Some of my clients only want to pay 1 invoice. I need some details on auto deposit. Is this possible? So if they only want to pay 1 invoice with auto deposit. So I think the question is more around getting set up with auto deposit and how that works.
Okay, so I'm not sure I entirely understand that question, but I guess the point here is that if you're using Interac e-transfer, there's a number of different ways you can use it. For example, if you send out an invoice yourself, you can certainly put instructions on how to pay through Interac e-transfer. And basically, if you set yourself up for auto deposit, all you have to do is instruct them to send money to a particular email address. And that works very well. On the flip side, if you want to be more proactive, you can actually send out a request for money, which again, you can put in some invoice information in the memo field, and you can put in an invoice number, and that provides sort of more of a tight coupling, so that when they fulfill that, you'll see the request has been fulfilled, and it's easier to. It's automatically tied back to that invoice that you sent out.
And we do have a few more questions. I want to be able to give you all some time back, so we'll cut it at 2 more. So one question here around what is there to stop a staff member from depositing an e-transfer to a bank account of their choice? So, for example, not a business account.
Right. So with sort of what I call classic e-transfer with security question and answer, It is important to make sure that people are sending Interac e-transfers to an email address that's only accessible by authorized people. The security question and answer again can be used in the traditional case to make sure that if somebody's sending a transfer, that they use a security question and answer that only authorized people have know the answer to. With auto deposit, it actually gets a little better because now if somebody sends an Interac e-transfer to that email address, it's going to automatically go to the bank account that you set up. So the business bank account. It becomes virtually impossible for somebody to direct that money somewhere else.
And the last question we'll answer today is around integration with desktop softwares or accounting software programs like QuickBooks, things of that nature. So is there any integration with these programs with Interac e-transfer today?
Yeah, and again, not today. That's something we would love to do. But at the moment, if you're using QuickBooks, for example, you would have to create the request for money in online banking, and then when the money comes in and gets fulfilled, you would have to enter that in QuickBooks. So there's a bit of manual reconciliation today, but it's a great idea, and certainly we're working on something like that.
Wonderful. So I want to thank Charlie for your time today. I want to thank the CFIB for inviting us to speak with you all today. And again, I want to thank you all for joining and for your wonderful engagement. With that, we will end the webinar. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks so much.